Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Hope you all are doing good. So today we'll talk about privileges and roles. So privileges plays an important role in data security by determining what action user can perform on data and system. Managing individual privileges for each and every user is not that much easy, especially for large organization. That's where roles come into a picture. Okay, so role is basically collection of privileges or group of privileges. So we will try to understand these two things in detail in this particular video. Okay, so basically first we'll understand what exactly is privileges. Okay, then what are different types of privileges, how we can grant and revoke privileges. Then we'll talk about what exactly is roles. Okay, how we can create role and assign role to different users. Okay, and finally how we can drop a role. So let's start this particular video. But before that, if you're new to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe it in order to see more such videos. And keep providing your support to us. Your support means a lot to us and that helps us creating more such contents and videos. So please like, subscribe and share this video in order to reach more audience. So let's talk about privileges. So what is privileges? If I talk about dictionary meaning of privileges, it means giving some sort of authority or rights to a user or a group. Okay. Same is applicable for Oracle database as well. Okay. It means, like privileges means giving some sort of authority to a user by which he or she can perform certain actions on a database like reading, update, create, etc. Okay. So there are basically two types of privileges. Okay. One is object privileges. Okay. So object privileges basically gives permission to one particular object such as table, view, package, index, etc. Okay. So it is basically limited to one particular table or object name. Okay. Some object privileges are alter, delete, index, insert, select, and update. Okay. So there is one keyword all which basically grant or revoke all available object privileges to one particular user. Okay. And this is quite useful. Okay. Otherwise, like if we want to assign all object privileges to one particular user, in that case explicitly we'll have to mention all object name. All provides us that facility by which in a single keyword we can assign all object privileges to one particular user. So please note that all here is not a privilege, rather than it's a shortcut way of assigning and revoking all object privileges. Okay. Then we have system privileges. Okay. So system privileges basically allow access to make changes to entire database. Okay. So it's not specific to one particular table or object. There are more than 100 system privileges. Some important system privileges are create session, create table, create view, create user, create procedure, create sequence, and connect. Okay. Now let's talk about how we can grant object privileges to one particular user or role. Okay. So for that one, we do have syntax grant object privileges. We'll have to specify object privileges name over here. Okay. On object name, then we'll have to specify a specific object name like table, view, etc. to username. Okay. Then we'll have to specify username with grant option. Okay. So here this with grant option is optional. Okay. And this is quite important feature. If we are assigning any one particular object privileges using this particular option, it means the grantee will have access by which he or she can also grant access to other users. If we are not granting object privileges using with grant option, it means the assignee or grantee, he or she cannot further delegate it to other users. Okay. It means he will not have access to assign it to other users. So that particular object cannot be further delegated. So in that way, it provides more security. Okay, so only the authorized user or authorized grantee can further delegate this particular access to other users. Okay, now let's talk about some examples. Okay, so first one is grant all own item to John. Okay, so in this example we are granting all object privileges on the table item to the user John. Okay, next we have grant select update on employee to John. So here this particular statement grants select and object privileges on the table employee to the user John. So that's how we can grant object privileges to one particular user or role. Now let's talk about how we can revoke object privileges. So basically the syntax is revoke then object privileges on object name from username. Okay. So here is the example. Okay. Revoke all on employee from John. Okay. So what it will do? It will basically revoke all privileges on the table employee. Those are granted to user John. Okay. Then another example we have is revoke delete on employee from John. Okay, so what it will do, it will basically revoke delete privileges on the table employee from the user John. Okay, so that's about granting and revoking object privileges. Okay, now let's talk about how we can grant and revoke system privileges. Okay, so basically the syntax is grant system privileges to username with grant option. Okay, so here we are talking about system privileges. Okay, we are not talking about object privileges, so on keyword will not be there. Okay, so it's a straightforward syntax, only grant, then system privileges, and then username. Okay, similarly revoke statement will look like this: revoke system privileges from username. Okay, so you will have to simply put grant and revoke keyword. Okay, and thereafter you can put system privileges. If you are granting, then you will have to use to keyword, and if you are revoking, then you will have to use the from keyword. Okay, let's talk about some examples. So grant create table to John. Okay, so this is basically giving create table access to user John. Revoke create table from John. So this is basically revoking create table access from John. Okay, now let's talk about roles. Okay, so role is basically group of privileges. Okay, so what we can do, we can club multiple privileges in one role. Okay, and we can assign that role to one particular user. Okay, let's consider this use case. Let's say you will have to assign n privileges to one particular user. Okay, or maybe multiple users. Okay, so what you will do, you will type those privileges. Okay, and you will start granting. Okay, if you have 100 users, then you will have to write that statement 100 times, including all the n number of privileges. Okay, so in that place what we can do, we can create one role, we can club all those privileges in one package, and that role we can assign it to particular user or multiple users. Okay, so this is basically the use case of roles. So basically what you can do, you can club all the privileges in one package. That package is basically called roles, and that role can be assigned to multiple users. Okay, so you can see the list of roles in DBA roles table. If you are having like multiple roles in one particular database, then using DBA roles table, it will list down all the different roles. Okay, some important standard Oracle roles are connect. Okay, so this is basically used to connect database. Okay, this include privileges like create session. Okay, so using this particular role, you can assign, if you're going to assign connect role to one particular user, then he or she will have access to connect to Oracle database. They can create session. Okay, then we have resource. Okay, So this is basically, like more related to create and manage their own database objects. Okay. So this basically includes privileges such as create table, create view, create procedure, etc. Okay. So this is basically how, like we can manage different sort of resources. Those rules are basically related to resource. Okay. Then we have DBA. Okay, so this basically provide full access to database. Okay, it basically grant all system privileges to user. Okay, so that like user will have full control over the database. Okay, normally it gives to or it assigned to DBA. Okay, now let's see how we can create role. Okay, so basically the syntax is pretty clear and simple. Create role and then role name. Okay, let's look at the example. So create role C hash hash user one. Okay. Please keep one thing in mind. Okay. In multi-tenant architecture, we do have certain naming convention for common user and roles. As per that, like role name should have prefix of C hash hash. That's the reason we are using here C hash hash. Okay. If you are using Oracle version prior to 12c or maybe non-multi-tenant architecture, okay, in that case you can use any sort of role name. There is no such naming convention. Okay, but in multi-tenant architecture we do have. That's the reason we are using here C hash hash user one. Okay, now let's see how we can grant and revoke privileges to role. Okay, so grant privileges to role name. Okay, so we'll have to specify our privileges. Whatever different privileges we'll have to assign to that particular role. Okay, similarly, for revoke, we do have revoke privileges from role name. Okay. Now let's look at the examples. Okay. So grant create table, create view to C hash hash user one. Okay. It means it will grant access of create table and create view to this particular user. Okay. Now revoke create table, create view from C hash hash user one. So this will simply revoke access from the user. Okay. Now how we can grant and revoke role to user. Okay. So let's try to understand. In earlier slide we were talking about how we can assign or deassign privileges to role. Now we are talking how we can assign and deassign role to user. Okay. So the syntax is almost the same. Grant role name to username with admin option. Okay. So if you are granting one particular role using with admin option, it means grantee will have full access to that particular object. Okay. He can further grant that particular role to other user. At the same time, he can do any sort of alteration and he can also drop the role. Okay. Then how we can revoke the role from user? So revoke role name from username. Okay. Let's look at some examples. So grant test underscore role to John. Okay. So test underscore role, that role is granted to John. Then revoke test underscore role from John. So we are simply revoking test underscore role from John. I think it's a very straightforward thing. I hope you are able to understand this point. Let's move on. So finally, how we can drop role. Okay. So basically the syntax is almost same whatever we use for dropping table or any other object. Okay. So basically the syntax here is drop role name. Okay. Let's look at some example. Drop role test underscore role. So here we are dropping role test underscore role. Okay. So that's about all the concepts related to privileges and roles. Let's do some practical exercise now. Okay, so first we'll try to grant access to one particular object to one particular user. Okay, I have already created one user, C hash hash user one. We'll try to give some object privileges access to this particular user. Okay, so let's type grant select update So first we'll give select and update access on table student. This is what we created sometimes back. Okay, so we'll give this access to user c hash hash user 1. Okay, so see, grant succeeded. Okay, it means now this user c hash hash user 1, he or she can access this particular table and having privileges select and update. Okay, now we can revoke it. Revoke select update. Okay, on student from user c hash hash user 1. Okay, so it has simply revoked the access from the user c hash hash user 1 on the table student. Okay, now let's grant this one, grant all. Okay, on student to c hash hash user 1. Okay, so now all the object privileges are assigned to this particular user. Okay, simply we can revoke this access as well. Okay, using revoke all on student now from user c hash hash user 1. Okay, now let's try to assign some system privileges to this particular user. Okay, so grant, let's say create session, okay, to c hash hash user 1. Okay, now this will give access to c hash hash user 1, so he or she can connect to database. Okay, so this access is granted. Similarly, we can give some more access. Let's say grant create table, create view to c hash hash user 1. Okay, so it will give access to user c hash hash user 1 so that he or she can create table and view. Okay, similarly we can revoke it. Revoke create table, create view from c hash hash user 1. Okay, so this access is revoked. Okay, now let's see how we can create role in Oracle database. Okay, so let's create one role. Create role. Okay, then the role name. Okay, as I told you, as per naming convention, we'll have to use c hash hash. Okay, then our role name. Okay, let's say maybe user. Okay, or maybe give it like this one, test underscore role. Okay, so this is actually our role name. Okay, so role is created. Okay, now assign some privileges to this particular role. Okay, so grant create table, create view, okay, to c hash hash test underscore role. Okay, so grant succeeded. Okay, now in the similar way we can revoke it. Okay, so for revoking, let's write revoke. Okay, create table, comma, create view from, okay, c hash hash test underscore role. Okay, so this has revoked successfully. Create table and create view access. Okay, now let's assign this particular role to particular user. Okay, so for that one we'll have to write a statement grant, okay, c hash hash test underscore role to c hash hash user 1. Okay, this is our user, so grant succeeded. Okay, so we have successfully assigned this particular role to user C hashes user 1. Okay, now finally we can remove or we can drop this particular role. Okay, drop role C hash test underscore role. Okay, so it has successfully dropped that particular role. Okay, so that's all for today. Hope you would have liked this particular video. Okay, please like and share the same. Okay, I'll come back to you with another interesting video. Till then, goodbye. Thank you. Keep watching.